Hey guys, welcome to Live by Faith Ministries. My name is Alina, and this is episode 3 of my series called If I'm Being Honest. And as a reminder, this series is just my thoughts, experiences, observations, opinions related to walking by faith and living by faith as best as I can, following Christ, following His Word. And so I'm going to jump right into this one because there's a lot to unpack that I want to talk about. And this topic in particular I want to address because growing up in church, there was a lot of church language surrounding this topic and creating a negative stigma surrounding emotions and feelings. And it creates a culture where, as a lot of you probably know and experience, where you're in church and you feel like you have to put on your happy face and you have to be joyful all the time, instead of allowing yourself to be human and experience these tough emotions and walk through them. So I wrote down some notes here so I don't forget some things that I do want to talk about. And this might be a longer video. We'll see how long it goes. But at the end, I do want to talk about like the practical strategies of like how to navigate emotions, at least from what I have learned. And I'm not saying I have things figured out because I don't. And we're all learning. We're all in this process of growing. And another just point I want to make is that like I want to talk about this as well because I feel like I lean on the hypersensitive side. I've always been very emotional. When I think back to myself as a child, I cried at things that were beautiful. I cried for a lot of things. I've always been a crier, and I feel these emotions very intensely. And like I said, a lot of the church language that has been placed upon emotions has made me feel a lot of guilt and shame for having those emotions. So that's why I also want to talk about this in case you're someone who resonates with this as well. So some phrases that I heard growing up are emotions lie, you cannot trust them. And feelings, the word feelings in general, became a bad word has become a bad word in like Christian circles. And I understand why, because with this phrase, emotions lie and don't trust your emotions, it's a yes and a no, because our emotions are real. When we experience them, it's a real reaction to something, whether it's chemical, hormonal, or circumstantial, they're real. Now, the part where a lie might come in is what we choose to believe because of that emotion. But with this idea or phrase of emotions or feelings lie, then what it does is put a blanket statement or a blanket on top of your emotions and say that, oh, they're bad, they're negative. If you're feeling sad about something, you're feeling depressed, or you have anxiety, or you're stressed, or whatever like negative emotion, you're supposed to suppress that and just be thankful and just feel the joy of the Lord. And it's more complex than that, in my opinion. So then with that mentality, it then leads to guilt and shame, which is not from the Lord. And it might even spiral into self-hatred because you shouldn't be feeling these feelings if you're a Christian. And then some other things too that I've noticed is like we tend to think that these strong or negative emotions mean that something is wrong with us. And I think this actually moves beyond the borders of the Christian circles, but just as a whole and societally right now, which is why so many young adults, children are flocking to antidepressants because they're being told something is wrong with them if they're feeling these feelings. And so it's better to just not deal with them. It's better to suppress them. Now, obviously, that's everyone's personal conviction in terms of taking an antidepressant or not. I'm just saying in general, we've seen this rise in trying to suppress these quote unquote negative emotions instead of dealing with them and working through them. Another thing, and again, this is maybe more societal, not necessarily connected to Christianity, but it's sad that men are seen as weak if they show emotion, when that is the farthest thing from the truth. And so, again, if emotions and feelings aren't talked about and expressed in a healthy way, especially in a place where we should feel able to and vulnerable in church or with other believers, then it can create this negative effect. And then another idea about this is that emotions are godly. So in general, when we think about emotions and feelings, when you read the scriptures, God has so many emotions. He experiences a whole array of them. And if we are created in the image of God, no wonder we have feelings and emotions, because he has them. And so in and of themselves, emotions are godly. It's just how we answer and respond to them. So one way I like to look at emotions, and I've heard this analogy somewhere, but I like to imagine it as lights going off on a dashboard in your car. So if you have the check engine light go off, you're going to do something about it. Or if you're, what's it called? Like the fuel sign comes up and shows that you're low on gas, then you go fill it up with gas. And so in the same way, that's what emotions are. They're indicators. And it might be indicators of something in your circumstance. It might be indicator that a physical need needs to be met. It might be an indicator of a trauma response, or you're triggered by something because of an experience in the past. And so when we experience an emotion, it's important to get to the root, the reason, and to evaluate it and say, okay, what is the reason why I'm feeling angry right now, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling stressed, or I'm feeling anxious? What is the root cause? Rather than trying to suppress the emotion. And I'm still learning this and trying to, again, navigate through all of this. But I've noticed that when I suppress my emotions because I don't want to feel it, it actually just continues to bottle up little by little by little, instead of actually dealing with it in a healthy way. And that's also one of the reasons why our bodies need to move. They need to eat well. We need to sleep. We need to hydrate. Exercise, like all of those things are related to taking care of our physical body, which does affect our emotions. And obviously our bodies are built to release emotion. That's why we cry. Our body has that built-in mechanism, and God put that there because he knows that we would experience these emotions and have to release that energy somehow. And I also want to make this point that emotions are energy. And energy, if you know like the law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be destroyed, only transferred or changed. And so in the same way, like I was saying, if we keep suppressing our emotions, then it just builds up more and more and more until it explodes. And if we're not taught how to regulate emotions, then that's why we see angry outbursts that lead to violence and things of that sort, when we're not taught how to deal with them or regulate them. So I want to pivot in this section to women specifically, because I'm a woman and I know that as women, we have it a little bit harder because of our hormonal shifts and changes all throughout the month, and even in the day just goes up and down, and the mood swings. And so as a woman, you go through these different parts of the month, and if you are tracking your cycle, you can kind of pinpoint certain times of the month where you are a little more sensitive or have more roller coaster emotions or more anxiety, because I've noticed that with myself. And this is why I believe it's also so important to be aware of our bodies in general, women and men alike, but to be aware of that, because when we know like where we are in our cycle as women, then we can have a little bit more grace for ourselves and not feel this self-hatred, because I believe like societally, women are expected to just keep going and never falter, never waver, always be strong. But our bodies are literally not meant to be that way. And so then we start feeling this shame of having anxiety, or shame of feeling low energy or more depressed or more sensitive during certain times of our month. But if we recognize and are aware of that, then we can give grace to ourselves and not think that something is wrong with us. And I think this might also be helpful for men to hear, because, I can't understand what it's like to be a man, and vice versa. They can't understand what it's like to be a woman and the different hormones that we have to deal with. And a man is actually more like a sun, where they're more constant and steady, whereas a woman is more reflected by the moon phases, which wane and wax and change. And so I think that's another just interesting connection in in God's design and how he portrays those different roles, even in nature. So another thing that I have also noticed in Christian circles, in church settings, again, not all, but I've noticed a theme that there's this tendency to detach the humanity of Jesus from him. And I don't know why we tend to do this and make him so sterile and make him seem kind of cold and heartless, when in fact his compassion is so much greater than ours could ever be. His emotions are he probably felt them a million times stronger than we do. And on my last video I made talking about the miscarriage I went through, I had briefly mentioned the story of Lazarus and how Jesus wept with Mary and Martha and those who were grieving that Lazarus had died. And I noticed someone had commented about that and said that Jesus wasn't weeping because they were weeping, but rather he was weeping because he was sad that they didn't believe or that they were in unbelief. And I went to reread the story because I'm like, I've read this so many times, and every time I read it, it seems like his motivation, his intention is he's weeping and grieving with them. And once again, I read it. I'm like, no, like it's pretty clear that he sees them crying and he's stirred in his spirit and starts crying with them. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because reading that comment actually kind of emphasizes this point that we have this tendency to remove the humanity from Jesus. And if he was crying because of their unbelief, then why wasn't he crying all the time? Because everyone around him was in unbelief. No, instead I imagine him hugging them and allowing Mary, Martha, all of Lazarus's friends to be weeping on his shoulder while he wept on theirs. And this is the amazing thing about our God, is that he relates with us and he cares for us and he loves us. So it makes me sad when we dehumanize him in this way and make him seem like he's upset when we are going through these tough and hard emotions. Rather, when we read in the scriptures, the Holy Spirit is our comforter. He's our helper. And that's the next thing I want to pivot to, is to talk about how God is not mad at you when you are going through some tough emotions, when you're feeling sad, or even when you're feeling depressed or if you're feeling anxious. He's not mad at you. He is with you. He wants to comfort you. He wants to guide you. And again, as someone who feels a lot of feelings, I've carried so much guilt and shame for feeling sad, because as a Christian, we're told to have the joy of the Lord and be grateful. And here's the thing, two can be true at once. You can feel sadness, you can feel anxious, you can feel stressed in that moment, but you can also be very, very thankful and understand that you have the joy of the Lord. And it's just about aligning those emotions with the truth, but it takes time to work through and feel those feelings to sometimes put it in submission to the truth. But it's not always helpful when you're in that crisis or in that intense emotion to be told advice or to be even told that truth. Sometimes you just need to feel that feeling and work through it. And like I said earlier in the video, find the root cause. Now, this is where I want to pivot into strategies. How do we manage our emotions? And I mean, there are so many tools and such a wide variety. And I mean, there's just so much to learn about how we manage ourselves and our emotions. But these are just a few things that practically have helped me and presently help me. So obviously the first thing, like I mentioned earlier, is finding the root cause. Why are you feeling the way that you're feeling? And oftentimes it could just be a physical need that needs to be met, like you're hungry, and so that's why you're angry, that's why you're cranky, or you're tired, or maybe you're sick, or maybe you need to cry and allow your body to release that emotion. Maybe you need to exercise. Exercise, I think, is strongly undermined, and even I don't utilize it as much as I should to get out that emotional energy. Because like I said earlier, emotions are energy, and so it needs to get out somewhere. Another way to also process emotions, like physically, is through journaling. Prayer is a way to release that, obviously, and worship. I think that for me personally, worship is one of the best ways to process my emotions, especially sadness, because it helps me fix my eyes on Jesus and remember that he's with me and that he's crying with me. He's not mad at me. And through whatever situation I'm going through, I can turn to him, worship him, feel his love, give my love to him, and then also cry in it at the same time. Now, another thing that I've also noticed, and I'm pretty sure other people experience this too, but sometimes there are days where I don't know why I'm feeling a certain way. Like I can't pinpoint why. But I'll notice that my brain doesn't like that I don't have an association. So it tries to make an association. So let's say, like one day I remember I woke up feeling sad. I just felt sad for no apparent reason. And what my mind wanted to do was connect a negative thought to that emotion. So then I noticed I started spiraling and thinking about that thought, and it started feeding that emotion and growing it bigger and bigger and bigger until I realized, wait a second. The reason I was sad in the first place wasn't even because of this spiral thought, but for some reason my mind connected it to that. So what I did was detach it and then just neutrally recognize that emotion, not hate it, not judge it, not hate myself for feeling that, but to just notice that emotion. Okay, it's sadness, and treat it like a wave. Like when a wave comes on shore at a beach, it always retracts, but it has to come forward first. And so I didn't think about feeding that emotion. I started thinking about other things, positive things, and I allowed myself to cry because it was sadness. So allow that emotion to pass through. And then before I knew it, it was gone. And that day was like an epiphany to me because I didn't realize that sometimes I feel an emotion that isn't attached to a reason, but I attach a reason to it and then I dwell on it over and over and over again instead of just letting it come and go. So again, this is not applicable to every single emotion, but it can be a helpful tool. Now, another thing that I've done as a Christian, and I know other Christians do this too, is we tend to project our emotions onto God. And what I mean by that is if we are hurt or disappointed or angry about something, we look to God and say, why didn't you do something about this? Or we get angry at him for something. And I think it's important to learn to separate those things and remember the truth about God's character and his heart for us versus the emotion or experience that we're going through. And again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, why it's so important that we don't detach the humanity of Jesus from him. Because if we do, that's also what leads into this cycle of projecting our emotions onto God, when in reality, he's there with us through the thick, through the thin, and his love, his compassion, his care, his concern doesn't alter, doesn't shift, doesn't change. He remains stable when our emotions go up and down. So to wrap this all up, I just want to conclude with the goal of me talking about this is to remove the guilt and shame from emotions. Like I said at the beginning, I've felt so much guilt for having strong emotions and feelings and feeling things deeply because it's just not talked about in church circles, and it's seen as a weakness, and it's seen as like a character flaw or a moral flaw because, you know, you should be thankful all the time. But I do want to say, yes, obviously gratitude is an antidote to sometimes these spirals that we go through. And that's another thing I do want to address is emotions versus the spiraling, because emotions are one thing versus spiraling, which leads to sin. And that's why I mentioned earlier, sometimes when you have an emotion, you can just see it as a wave, see it as it's coming and going, instead of thinking that it's going to last forever. And that's something that helps me as well, because if you think that this wave of emotion is going to just, let's say, flood you, then you're going to feel it more intensely and you're going to drown in it, rather than recognizing like, okay, it's just a wave, it's going to come and it's going to go, and I can move forward and not dwell in this emotion. There's one more anecdote I wanted to share because this actually was last night. So I had a great day. My mood has been pretty stable recently, and But nighttime, for some reason, is when the enemy likes to target me the most, because I'm trying to go to bed and all these thoughts and questions and doubts start popping up in my head, the fiery darts of the enemy. And I started to notice these fiery darts trying to trigger my emotions, because I was having a great day. Like I said, my mood was stable, but all of a sudden, these thoughts were coming in of hopelessness and fear, doubt, questioning God's goodness. And then it started to make me cry. And I was like, wait a second, this is 100% from the enemy. This is not of God. And so I was able to kind of nip it in the bud, distract myself, think about something else, or just get up, go to the bathroom and just kind of reorient myself so that I'm not stuck in that spiraling. So to sum this all up, I believe awareness, acceptance, and healthy outlets are key to understanding your emotions and how to work through them. And to have people around you who can understand this as well, even if they can't relate, but someone you can talk through and feel safe around and not judged, is also so important. So that's part of why I want to bring this conversation to the Christian sphere. And yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, if this is something that resonated, or maybe you have further thoughts to add, things that I didn't talk about. Again, this is just my thoughts, my opinions. Agree, disagree, that's okay. But with that, guys, God bless. Remember, the just shall live by faith.